Welcome everyone. Welcome to Calling All Student Athletes. My name is Dr. Dean Scarless. I am president and founder of a college admissions consulting company called the College Advisor of New York. We're in upstate New York, a couple hours north of New York City. A little bit about what we do. We help families with the college admissions process. So we help the student primarily, but also parents find, select, get admitted to, and choose the best college for their student. And I like to add to that socially, academically, and financially. A big part, however, of what we do is focusing on athletes. So for those students who are athletes, we add the athletic piece as well. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit more about me. I've been doing this for about 15 years. I've always been in and around higher education. I have a doctoral degree from the University of Pittsburgh, a master's degree in psychology, and prior to my work with students in this capacity, I worked for ACT. I also worked for a couple of different universities, one in Pittsburgh, one in Ohio. And so for basically 30 years, I've been, as I said, in and around higher education, and have learned it from the ground up, having been on campuses in the past and working in enrollment management for a period of time. So as I mentioned, we work with high school kids and their parents, and we advise them on all aspects of college admissions consulting. Tonight's presentation is going to be primarily for athletes, but what you'll find as I go through the slides, and this is a copy of the agenda, is that you can't just focus on athletics and assume that you're going to get into a school primarily for athletics and not worry about anything else. It is inextricably intertwined with every other aspect of the process, including financial. So we'll start with the cost of college. As you probably understand, it's gone up astronomically in the past 25 years or so, and it continues a very steep ascent. Then we'll get into the athletic piece, but again, I'll also be talking about general college admission strategies as well, because you can't ignore those as we go through. So let's start with the environment that families are in right now. This is quite probably your largest family purchase, or at least it could be. Here in New York State, our public university system, if a student were to live on campus, costs about $25,000 or $26,000 a year. So you're going to eclipse $100,000 for students who live on campus. That's tuition, room and board, fees, books, etc. Unfortunately, in the private sector of higher education, the news is much worse. There are many schools, especially in the northeastern United States, where most of our clients are, that are now exceeding $78,000 a year. And just a few examples of those are places like NYU, RPI. Of course, all the Ivies are about that price right now, and so on. So if you do the math, that is a lot of money over 4 years, especially if you have more than one child. So this quite possibly could be your largest family purchase outside your home, or for some of you, it may be greater than the value of your home. And yet it used to be people qualified for need-based aid, and they got the aid and they got some help to pay for it. And if you didn't qualify, you figured out a way to pay. But obviously with those fees and those prices, that's much more difficult these days. First message: don't assume the high school will help you, especially with the athletic recruitment part and especially with the financial part. There are just not enough resources for college counselors at the high school level, public or private, to have the time to help you. And so that's the national ratio, believe it or not. For every 482 students, there's one high school counselor. And most kids receive an average of 38 minutes of college counseling throughout their high school career. This slide is from Bloomberg, and I can't find anything more recent. This stops in 2012, but I can assure you that that green line, which is the cost of college tuition and aid, has continued to rise very precipitously. But this tracks the increase in various costs from 1978 through 2012. And so the green line at the top is the increase in college costs. That's a 1,100% increase. We talked a lot about healthcare as a society these days, and that's dwarfed in terms of the increase by college tuition. Notice at the bottom, though, the consumer price index and the increase in the price of food over time. What this is telling you, this slide, is it takes a great deal more of your paycheck, perhaps all of it, to pay for college than it did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so this is something really important for parents to understand. It's a very expensive proposition. What's worse is the national dropout rate is extremely high. And believe it or not, this is not the dropout rate for athletes. This is for all students across the United States. About 49% of kids are not finishing college at the 4-year level in 4 years. And so not only is it expensive, but you could make a very expensive mistake. I was talking to a friend just yesterday, and he was explaining to me how he knows a lot of other parents whose children are freshmen in college right now, but they already came home. They dropped out. And so finding the right fit and making sure that it's the right place for your son or daughter is critically important, just simply from a financial perspective, not to mention, getting a degree and having kids start their life on the right foot. So why do kids drop out? Number one reason is finance. Number two reason is the wrong academic fit. Now, notice what's not in here for athletes. It's not, oh, the coach was the wrong person for me, the school was the wrong fit athletically. Doesn't matter. Financial is still most important. Academic fit is very important as well, meaning you don't want too much of a challenge for your child, and you don't want them also to get bored with a lower level curriculum that might be beneath their academic ability. So it's not just about the athletic recruitment piece, which is still important for athletes, but these two eclipse that in their level of importance. Just some information about student debt. As you may have heard, it's a $1.6 trillion price tag. That's all the student loans in the United States that are out right now. And that's been going up significantly over the last 15 or 20 years. About 75% of students right now have some form of student debt. This graphic goes to 2015, it says 71%. We're up to about 3/4 right now. And then the average student has about $36,000 in student loans. Not only that, but many more parents now are taking out loans for college. And so that's what this graphic mentions. So you don't want to leave potentially a $300,000 plus decision to the emotion of your teenagers. Parents, you have to insert yourself in this whole process, but that's where it gets tricky because you can't take over the process. And therefore the student really needs to take control of it and make certain that they're owning it, especially with respect to the recruitment process. But mom and dad still need to be heavily involved because you're going to be the one who's going to ultimately pay the bills. So this is an important takeaway for athletes and non-athletes. What are the most important factors that college admissions people use to evaluate students? First and foremost is grades in core courses. So that's typically English, math, science, social studies, and language. Those are far more important than obviously health class or gym in terms of the way college admissions people will evaluate your son or daughter. But even elective courses, students should try to do as well as they can, but the college admissions folks are going to look at those 5 pieces. Next would be SAT or ACT scores. Start early on those. They should be taking those early. They should be doing practice tests. If you have the funds, they should be doing some sort of formalized SAT or ACT prep course. We offer that sort of thing to our clients. Third, and this is sort of 3A and 3B, the college essays, and 3B would be the quality of the applications themselves. Critically important. Students have to present themselves and communicate clearly to the admissions people a little more about themselves that the admissions folks wouldn't otherwise know from reading the rest of their applications. Important component for athletes. Don't write about your sport. Even if that's your thing, that's who you are, that defines you. We don't want to know only about that. We want to know something different. They're going to understand how much time you devote toward your sport through the rest of the application. They're going to see that very clearly. And hopefully they're going to be hearing from one of the coaches as well as to your prowess athletically. So we need to focus on a different aspect of your personality. And again, that's a service that we provide to our students to help them really brainstorm a topic that's unique to them and present themselves in a way that's going to be compelling to admissions folks. Number 4 is demonstrated interest. In terms of athletes, they need to interact with coaches, and I'll get into that in much more detail, but that's a form of demonstrated interest. I won't go into the details behind this, but suffice it to say, this is an extremely important aspect these days. Colleges' yield rates are declining, and therefore they need to try to predict who is likely to enroll and who is not. And they employ sophisticated formulas to do that. And so you have to come out high on that predictive modeling score. That's where demonstrated interest comes in. The easiest way to demonstrate one's interest in a school is to visit and do an official campus visit with the admissions office and I would say with the coach or the athletic department. 5 will be teacher recs. They can't be coach recs. They have to be teachers who've had the student in class, preferably during their junior year, but there's some wiggle room there. And then finally, extracurricular involvement. They don't only want to see that you play soccer. You play travel soccer, and then you play school soccer, and that's all you do. There needs to be some breadth of involvement. It doesn't matter what the student is involved with, as long as it's, legal and it's outside of athletics. That needs to be there. So when we talk about athletic recruitment, you want to start in 10th grade. Many coaches now are recruiting students even as early as 8th or 9th grade, especially for girls' sports, because girls mature physically quicker than boys, and oftentimes they're fully grown by 8th or 9th grade, and so you see some coaches recruiting at that level. Of course, for high level, what I call blue chip athletes, students are going to be going to recognizable Division I big sports programs. Oftentimes that recruitment begins in 8th or 9th grade as well. But for most of us, it's going to be 10th grade. You may start to receive letters, brochures, certainly emails about different team camps and different activities from college coaches. You can call coaches now, and that's going to be a theme as I go through this. You really need, and when I say you, I mean the student, to own this process and to take charge of it. The coach cannot call you at this point in 10th grade. Also, off-campus contact and official visits, which is an athletic term, are not yet permitted in most sports. Unofficial visits certainly can happen, and the coaches can talk with you even prior to 10th grade, or certainly in 10th grade, on their campus. So that's where you might be invited to a team camp, and you can attend that particular camp on campus, and the coach can talk to you as much as he wants or she wants. But just know that college coaches cannot participate in a regular admissions office visit, or what we call an unofficial visit to the campus. unofficial athletically is what we mean by that. So they can't, if you're going to visit campus, the coach can't show up and start talking with you. All of the contact that the coaches can have with you begins September 1st of the prospective student's junior year. So the very beginning of junior year is when college coaches can begin contacting you in an official capacity. Now, many college coaches find loopholes in this, and there are several of them. One of them is to contact the student's travel or club coach, or sometimes their high school coach, if they're interested in an athlete. And then that coach communicates that to the student, and then the student can certainly contact the coach. But the contact can't be initiated from the coach or the athletic office until September 1 of a student's junior year in high school. So as a junior, you can certainly call the coach. The coach can begin calling you in September, again, September 1 of your junior year of high school. And there's all forms of electronic communication, which primarily is email these days. And then once a coach certainly gets to know you a little bit and expresses some interest, they'll start to text you. A lot of them use Twitter, and there are ways to communicate via Twitter because that's still a public forum and not counted as a contact. And so if you have a Twitter account, you can certainly use that to express your interest in this particular athletic program, but also to communicate with coaches that way. But it'll be primarily, initially at least, email and then probably text after that. So beginning of September 1, your junior year, a student can do official visits. Now again, I want to distinguish between an admissions office visit and an athletic official visit. Official visits are only in place really for Division I and Division II athletes, and they get 5 official visits. So that would be a school inviting you. It's not you inviting yourself. A school will invite you to an official visit, and if that happens, you know they're very serious about you playing for them in college. And you can do 5 of those. In many cases, the school will pay for a big portion of your visit, and that's allowed, believe it or not, under NCAA rules. So you can do 5 official visits. Now, for D3 and NAIA schools, you have unlimited official visits, and they're a little less official, but they're still considered that way. But that will occur in the junior year. As a senior, certainly you can receive info, you can contact the coach. There is off-campus contact allowed, meaning they could come to your high school, they could come to games, but that's limited to no more than 3 times. And again, you can do official visits in your senior year. I want to emphasize the point that, as I mentioned earlier, the blue chip athletes, the 7-foot center who's getting recruited by Villanova University, is going to start that process and have much more contact earlier. But I've had students that have gone through our process who haven't gotten their official letter or visit, and even their first official visit, until the spring of their senior year. So the timing varies, and it varies for numerous reasons. Obviously, the skill level or the talent of the athlete, they might bloom a little bit later, or a coach might have an unexpected opening, a student gets injured, or they transfer, or what have you. And so the spot opens up in the student's junior or senior year that wasn't there earlier. So it's important to understand that the timelines vary, not only in that respect, but also with respect to the different sports. And a good website that you should check out is just Google the term NCAA Eligibility Center. All of the rules are there. Honestly, they're a bit confusing. And so I would recommend working with someone who has knowledge of that whole process, but you can certainly go to that website and learn more on your own about the various rules. There are things called quiet periods, dead periods, where you can't contact the coach can't contact you. There are different parts of the athletic calendar that are either open for communication or not. And so you have to be aware of how that plays out for your particular sport. That those periods differ from sport to sport. So this slide is really, really important. I would venture to say that about 85 to 90% of the students that I work with who play a sport in high school, and even those who say, I want to play in college, will not play in college. And most of them either, that's for several reasons. One, they can't play, they're just not good enough. Or two, they're not fully committed. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean when it comes right down to it, they'll decide that they don't want to play. And that's absolutely fine. And so you have to figure out where your student fits in that. If they absolutely 100% want to play, and one of the questions I ask them is scale of 1 to 10. 10 means I definitely want to play soccer in college. 1 means I don't want to play. Where are you on that scale? And that's a good question to ask your son or daughter. Where are you? If you're a 9 or higher, it's pretty likely that you'll play. If you're below an 8, what I've seen is those kids probably won't. They may, but they probably won't. And so so the student has to be serious about it, but the coaches have to want them to play as well. And so the term unsolicited contact from a coach is critically important. And when I mean that, I mean personal contact. So interestingly, my son is going through this process as well. He's a high school age student. He plays baseball. He'd like to play in college, at least at this point. And so he's gotten a dozen or so emails that are form emails from colleges. Johnny, we saw you play at this camp, which he attended. He attended one camp, and we'd really like to have you come down and play at our team camp. And so they're inviting you to that team camp. That's different than we saw you play at XYZ, and this is Coach Jones, and I'm really interested in you as a pitcher for my program. Could we talk? And could you come down to campus? Those are two totally different emails. So you can tell if the email is a form email, if it's written by, let's say, Constant Contact or one of those large platforms, which would mean it's a blast email that's going out to as many as 100, 200, 500 potential student athletes, or if it's a very personalized email for your son or daughter. And certainly if there's a phone call that comes from a coach, that's what I would deem as unsolicited contact. And so if that begins to happen, then you know that the coaches at whatever level are interested in having your son or daughter play. Either way, your son or daughter should be going to showcases, ID camps, and team camps as much as you can possibly afford. And frankly, they're expensive. Some of them are $300 or $400. I've seen some that are $1,000 to go to a prospect camp for your particular sport. Nonetheless, you really need to attend several of those. But the most important of those is that third term there, the team camps. My best advice to you is to identify at least a dozen colleges where your son or daughter think they can play and where you and they think that that will be a good fit for them socially and academically, as well as financially. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So it has to be the complete fit, not just, oh yeah, I think I can be a pitcher at XYZ school because I've looked at their roster and it looks like I fit with them. It has to be the complete fit. So you have to do some research early. I would say as early as 10th grade as to where your son or daughter is interested in attending. And then I would begin contacting those coaches and asking to sign up at their team camps, which go throughout the year. Of course, that varies depending on the sport. If after you attend one of those team camps and a coach is interested, then they will give you that unsolicited contact that I mentioned earlier. And so that's when you know that you're probably going to be a recruited athlete at whatever level, Division I, II, or III, if you get that contact from a particular coach. And so you have to identify those schools early, and I can't underscore that enough, and attend their team camps and start contacting coaches. After that, or perhaps during that process, it's about mounting a campaign, a personalized campaign, and this must be done by the student, not mom or dad, and that's critical. The coaches do not want to talk to mom or dad. In fact, if they do, if they're hearing from you more than once, that's a bad sign to them. They want to understand who the student is. They want to understand his or her commitment to the sport, the likelihood that they're going to play, and just get to know them as a person, because the coaches are putting together a team and they really need to understand the personalities and the team aspect of the students that they're recruiting. So the student needs to mount this campaign. When I say that, I mean sending dozens of emails out to coaches explaining that you're interested in their school. They need to be personalized. You can't just say, I'm interested in your college and I would love to come there. It needs to say, I'm really interested in playing baseball at Hamilton College, and I've looked at the school from various perspectives and I think it's the right academic and social fit for me as well. Could we talk? So you can do emails, calls, texts, and of course visits, and that's critically important. And you probably won't hear back from the majority of coaches for a couple of reasons. One, they're too busy. Two, they may not think that you can play for them, depending on, of course, on the situation. So I've talked with a couple of college coaches who tell me that on a typical recruitment day, they probably get 20 to 25 emails from potential recruits. And that's just too much for them, given all the other stuff they have going on, to go through and to really get interested in. So the content of those emails is critically important. Again, that's something that we help students with. I don't have the time to go into that right now, but that's something you should understand. So this is the various types of ways that you apply to college. The point I want to make with this slide is a quick one, and that is many coaches, not all, will ask students if they really are seriously recruiting them to do early decision. Early decision is the binding college admissions choice. So the idea is the student applies early, usually before November 1st of their senior year of high school. Sometimes there's ED deadlines that are later. It really depends on the school. So you apply early, you find out early, typically by December 15th or so, or December 20th, as to whether you get accepted or not. And if they accept you, then you're definitely going there, to the extent that you have to withdraw all of your other applications from all of your other colleges. So early decision is a binding agreement between the student and the school saying, I will attend if you take me, okay? Most coaches try to lock their athletes up in that process, again, to get that commitment. One important distinction, though, is, and you'll hear coaches say things like, you're on my team. I want you on my team at the collegiate level. And a lot of students think, well, that's great. I'm on the team. I'm done. Absolutely not. The coach is not the admissions officer. And I've seen pretty bad situations a couple of times where the student has even signed their national letter of intent, really made an agreement with the school, with the coach, that I will be playing for you next year, and that same student does not get admitted. So the coach is not the admissions committee. They cannot decide whether you've been admitted, even if they say, I've done an early read. And what that means is they send your materials, your transcript, your test scores, your essays, your application, the whole package to the admissions person. And the admissions people might say, yeah, it looks pretty good. That decision has not been made yet. And so you can't trust it until you've actually been admitted by the admissions office. But I just wanted to point that out with early decision, because Sometimes it happens very quickly. In the fall of your senior year, you start to go on official visits. You get an offer from a school. The coach says, I want you to do early decision. And then you have to apply, and you have to get admitted. On the financial front, this is also a critically important slide. There are 3 pots of money for athletes. For most students, there are 2 pots of money, and that would be hashtag 2 and 3 below. Need-based financial aid and merit/academic scholarships. That's for most students. When you're an athlete, there could be, and I stress could be, athletic scholarships as well. However, athletic scholarships are only given at the Division I and Division II level. There's no such thing as an athletic scholarship at the Division III level at all. Now, for Division III athletes, the coach might work with the admissions folks to say, hey, I'd really like this student to play for us. Can you give him or her a merit scholarship or an academic scholarship? And if that's the case, great. And it'll sort of be a little bit of both, but athletic scholarships are distinctive at the Division I and Division II levels from these other 2 things. Critical point here. Many parents think, well, we've been paying for travel baseball or club soccer for the last 5 years or 6 years, and we've paid upwards of $10,000, probably more than that, given all the trips that you've probably taken over time. And we've been there too. I've been to Georgia, I've been to Maryland, I've been to Florida, just for baseball already with my son. And so you might have spent tens of thousands of dollars, and you might have thought, well, I'll get that payback in an athletic scholarship. Chances are you will not. I've worked with blue chip kind of kids, baseball players, soccer players, who have only gotten 1/3 of tuition. Now that's not room and board at a public institution. So a public institution, meaning, let's just say the University of Delaware, the in-state tuition is what a lot of schools limit their scholarships to. The in-state tuition at the University of Delaware, just tuition, not room and board, might be $10,000. And I've seen kids get $3,300 of that. Now, out-of-state tuition and room and board and fees at the University of Delaware is $50,000. So you might get $3,300 off your $50,000 tuition at that school. And even if you're a really good player, that is likely to happen because each athletic team, and it differs from sport to sport, has a limit on the number of scholarships it can provide. And so typically they split those up across all of their students. And the very, very, very best prospective student athlete might get a half tuition scholarship or a full tuition scholarship. And then everybody else gets less than that. So that's really important to understand. Nonetheless, there are still 2 other pots of money, and that's need-based financial aid, which is based on your income and your assets, and I'll talk briefly about that in a minute, and then strict academic scholarships. And so one point on that that's really important. Rhetorical question. What's the first question that every coach asks a prospective student athlete? What are your grades like? That is almost always, and that goes across sports and across levels. Even at the Division I basketball level, where the coaches have tremendous leeway with respect to their student athletes, they still want to understand, are you going to be admissible or not? And all the way up to Harvard University, they still need to know, are you admissible? Because if you're not, they're not going to waste your time or theirs recruiting you because you're not going to be able to get in. So academics is a critical component of this. Please don't think that, well, my son's a magnificent football player and it doesn't matter what his grades are because he's going to get in. That's simply not the case anymore. There are minimum standards that the NCAA sets, There are curricular standards in terms of the specific classes that students take, and you can check that at the Eligibility Center that I mentioned earlier. And so all of this stuff is integrated, the academic, the financial, and the athletic. This is just a primer, and I won't spend much time on it, on the need-based financial aid process. This is the second of those three that I just identified. And basically what colleges do is they look at the income and asset of the student and the parent. And then there are a whole bunch of other factors that go into that formula, but it enters a formula and it spits out a number, which is called your expected family contribution, or your EFC. And that's determining, in part, how much need-based aid you'll qualify for. So it is possible that if that EFC is lower than the total cost of attendance, that you'll qualify for some need-based aid. You may get additional athletic scholarship money or not, and you still could get additional academic scholarship money or not. But typically families, even athletes who are excellent athletes and students who are excellent students, pay what their EFC, or expected family contribution, says they should pay. And that number is often much higher than most families can ever believe that it could be. And so we spend a lot of time with our clients on this issue, because I want you, Mom and Dad, I want you to be able to afford the college that your son or daughter attends. And please don't assume that you're going to just qualify for lots of athletic scholarship money and it's going to be free. That is absolutely rare that occurs. This is kind of how it works. You take the total cost of attendance minus that EFC, that equals your need, and different schools will meet some or all of your financial need. I just wanted to put that out there because there is a process for applying for aid and for determining what that expected family contribution is. And the coaches will work with you on that if necessary. And the financial aid offices, of course, at the school. So as a summary, you want to start this process early. 10th grade, again, if you have a blue chip athlete, 8th or 9th grade could be the time that begins, depending on the situation. It's more unusual that it occurs that early, but 10th grade is a good time to begin. You want to understand your affordability early in the process. If your child is being recruited by Harvard University to play football at Harvard, and you know you're not going to qualify for need-based aid, and you also know, which most people don't, that the Ivy League schools don't give athletic scholarships, and you're at all, no matter how good you are, then you're going to be expected to pay $76,000 a year at Harvard. And you may say that's not worth it, or you may not be able to pay that much or to afford that. There are many, many other schools out there that don't give any merit scholarships and don't give athletic scholarships. The NESCAC schools, the New England Sports League, which is places like Hamilton and Bowdoin, they give zero in merit scholarships or athletic scholarships. The only thing you're going to get at those places is need-based money. So understanding what you can afford early in the process is critically important. We go through that with every single one of our clients, regardless of their income and assets, because I don't want them to be blindsided at the end of the process. Understand the different levels of need that a college has. There are different financial aid formulas. You have to educate yourself about that piece as well. Students, you need to mount a campaign. You need to be realistic about what level you can play at, Division I, II, or III. The fact is, most kids who are playing in college are playing at the Division III level. And probably most of the people listening to this webinar will be Division III athletes, if they're athletes at all. But you have to understand that realistically, and you have to mount a campaign. If you mount a campaign and you contact 14 Division I schools and none of them gets back to you, and you follow up with them and still none of them gets back to you, you're probably not going to be a Division I athlete. And so you may have to refocus your efforts on lower level Division II or Division III schools. You should always plan ahead to get those essays and applications done early, whether you're an athlete or not. we work with kids on that piece of the process in the summer before their senior year of high school. And so that's important that you're working on that stuff early, especially if a coach comes along in September and says, we want you to do early decision. You better have the majority of your essays and applications done at that point, so you're not scrambling around, given you might have a sport that you're playing in the fall and you have academics, of course, and we don't want you to put together bad applications in a hurry. Be strategic about this process. Understand where you fit socially, academically, financially, and athletically, not just athletically. Too many parents make that mistake. Too many kids make that mistake. I love this coach. That's great. You love the coach. Then you get there your freshman year, you blow out your knee. Are you going to stay on campus? Are you going to actually enjoy the rest of the campus atmosphere for your 3 years there, because you're not going to be part of the team at that point? That's always a question that I ask my students. What happens if you blow out your knee? Are you going to be okay at that school for the rest of your time there? And then certainly if you'd like to contact us, you can do so. We help clients at all income levels. We help athletes. We help non-athletes. We provide admissions aid, test prep advice. Our acceptance rate for all of our kids is 91%. So if a student applies to 10 schools, our average student gets into 9 of them. But more importantly, our graduation rate, our 4-year grad rate is 90%. That's for athletes and non-athletes. And I mentioned to you earlier, it's only about 51% nationwide. So we're helping kids find the best fit, not just as an athlete, but across the way and across the board. But we can also help you save time, money, and again, find that school that's the best fit. You can go to our website. It's collegeadvisorny.com, where you can contact us. I have lots of resources on there for athletes. As I mentioned, you should definitely go to the NCAA Eligibility Center, and you should look up the rules and the process for your son or daughter's specific sport. I don't think we have any questions, so I'm going to sign off right now, but please feel free to contact me. Again, it's dean@collegeadvisorny.com, or just go to our website, collegeadvisorny.com. Thank you for your time and attention, and I will hopefully hear from you in the near future, and good luck with the recruitment process.